Hello everybody and welcome to So I Play Games. I'm your host Scott, and today I want to talk about a game called Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. Dream Drop Distance is a real-time action-adventure RPG that was developed and published by Square Enix. In Dream Drop Distance, you follow Sora and Riku as they take on the Mark of Mastery test. The test takes place in new realms called the Sleeping Worlds, worlds that have been so damaged by the darkness that they went into a sleeping state. In these worlds, you meet the new enemy and friend known as the Dream Eaters. With the Dream Eaters at their side, Sora and Riku travel to each sleeping world, waking them up, resisting the temptation of darkness, all the while discovering an unwelcome guest has followed them there. Dream Drop Distance picks up almost directly after Recoded, with Sora and Riku leaving Destiny Island on their raft, making their way to Master Yen, Sid, and Mickey for the Mark of Mastery test. On their way there, the raft is attacked by Ursula. After a quick fight, the raft is destroyed and they're knocked unconscious. While they're unconscious, a portal to the sleeping realm is open for them and they unknowingly pass through it. You then get a flashback to Yen Sid discussing past events to Sora and Riku, and how they must take on the Mark of Mastery test to prepare for the fight they have ahead of them. This is when the adventure really begins. With Sora and Riku traveling to the same, yet different versions of the sleeping worlds, they have to work together to find the nightmares keeping the worlds asleep so that they can defeat them and wake the worlds up. They take turns falling in and out of sleep, working with whole new characters to the series, while being shadowed by someone in a very familiar black cloak. As usual, the travel system to each world is introduced, but instead of the gummy ship, it's the new dive system. Even though it's a different system, it still runs on a similar format as previous games. You fight enemies and bosses, nightmares in this case, but as you dive, you have to collect a set amount of prizes for an overall score at the end. You're ranked on how many prizes you collect and how fast you do it. If you get an A rank in the dive, you're rewarded with items, skills, and spells mattering on the level you completed. I didn't find it as entertaining as the Kingdom Hearts 2 gummy ship levels, but the dives are over pretty quick, so it's not much of a hindrance to the game itself. As for the worlds themselves, Dream Drop Distance brings deep cut nostalgia from worlds we haven't seen in a long time, while also bringing never before seen ones. It was a pleasant surprise to see the series return to a more open level design. Having the choice to actually explore every corner of the map and being rewarded with finding secret chests was a more than welcoming return to form, especially with puzzles being brought back for minor challenges to navigate through some of the worlds. Most of the worlds are built around being able to chain the new flow motion feature, and it works more often than not. It's a little hit or miss on what services you can use or if it will trigger at all. On the same topic, you can accidentally be trying to dodge from attack and trigger flow motion without wanting to. Unfortunately, with the new flow motion feature, it feels like a clash of ideas. Whereas you're rewarded for taking your time and exploring, it's encouraged you use flow motion to quickly get around before you drop. That's not to say I didn't love it. It goes without saying how much fun it was to have the freedom to fly all over the map at breakneck speeds. In the end, I couldn't be more happy to see the series return to a more open and free roam concept. The freedom to explore and freedom to figure out what to do next is what I fell in love with in the first place, and I can only hope it's here to stay. Visually, I can't say there's a leap forward in any way. Dream Drop Distance follows the same standards that Kingdom Hearts 2 set and just sticks with it. The worlds are large and just as aesthetically pleasing as before, especially with the new worlds. Seeing the movies come to life as I ran through them was enjoyable as always. Sora and Riku have new designs for the sleeping worlds, along with the odd choice of being their younger selves. They aren't anything special, and if I'm being completely honest, I like the older design better, especially Riku's. The new enemy designs are definitely different too. Rather than taking on forms related to the theme of the world like the Heartless and Nobodies did, the Nightmares mostly take on animal-like forms no matter the area. They're a new and interesting take than I was used to, and I can't lie that when I saw some of them, I wanted them on my team right away. When it comes to the level progression and overall growth, Dream Drop Distance takes a mix from both Kingdom Hearts 1 and Birth by Sleep's format. I'll start off with what's new. First, there's the Dream Eaters. They're the new enemy and companion of Dream Drop Distance. The difference between the good and the bad is whether it's been corrupted by darkness. The Dream Eaters that are not corrupted are called spirits, and the ones that are called nightmares. You can create spirits from pieces you collect after defeating nightmares or by buying them from shops. You can mix and match ingredients to try and make random spirits, or with recipes you can also buy or find throughout the game. Before creating your spirit, you can also choose to use items to boost their initial stats and level. They take the place of Donald and Goofy as your companions, and you can have up to 3 in your group, but only 2 will follow you around. Spirits take up a large portion of Dream Drop Distance. You have to devote a lot of time to bonding with them, creating new and more useful ones, leveling them up, playing mini games with them to earn link points, feeding them to boost their stats, and fighting with them in flick tournaments. All of this is needed for making them more useful in combat for you, but worst of all, Sora and Riku's defense, attack, health, along with other very important bonuses are unlocked through all of this, so it's a must for progressing through the game. Even the rewards for completing challenges are mostly dedicated to making better spirits, or the ones you already have, better. Leveling is almost completely reliant on your spirits. You do level up, but you earn link points too, that are used for unlocking the more vital upgrades required for becoming stronger. The link points are used on your spirit's link board to unlock anything from items, spells, abilities, passive abilities, and stat bonuses for Sora and Riku. Most of these can be mastered if enough are unlocked through the link board, but some will need you to have the spirit in your party to get the benefits. Other abilities and spells can be bought at shops, through challenges, in chests, or through the natural progression of the story. Overall, I wasn't the biggest fan of so much being dependent on the Dream Eaters and their use in battle. They were less reliable and less useful than Donald and Goofy, having to switch them in and out for certain skills to be available, on top of them constantly teleporting beside me to knock me off platforms and randomly trying to run through walls was more of a nuisance than anything. Something else that's new is the dropping feature, which is how you switch between playing as Sora or Riku. As it seems, if one is awake, the other is asleep. Unfortunately, you don't always get to choose when you switch. Every time you start with one of them, a timer starts to count down, and once the timer is up, you switch. This happens no matter what you're in the middle of doing, even if that's a boss fight. You can use Drop Me Not items to extend your time, but ultimately you will fall asleep and switch. Another option you have is to manually drop at save points, which ended up being the better option for me, so I wouldn't drop in the middle of something important. At the end of each drop, you're rewarded bonuses mattering on how well you did and how long you were in the world. These can be bonuses to anything from attack, defense, magic, affinity with spirits, decreasing the drop countdown speed, and even items or skills. Then there's the reality shifts, another new feature that's different for each world it's used in. It's triggered by interacting with an object specific to the world or by a nightmare when it's available. These usually help out with combat in some way or can help with discovering hidden areas. As for equipment, there isn't any to worry about outside of the Keyblades, and they're less versatile now. Where in previous games you could use Keyblades you earned before based on the abilities that came with them, this time, once you earn a new Keyblade, the previous one becomes irrelevant. Which leads me to the combat that takes from Birth by Sleep's format. As always, you start off with the bare minimum and slowly progress to longer combos, better skills, spells, and mobility. Unfortunately, because there's so much dependency on the Dream Eaters to have those abilities, the progression felt much slower and frustrating. Command decks are back and they're the same as before. You have a certain amount of slots you equip your spells and abilities to, and you earn more slots as you level up and move through the game. Your movement abilities are under the same system, so as you unlock better ones, you have to add or switch them out from your deck. On top of that, MP has been replaced by a cooldown for both spells and skills. Like mentioned before, your spirits join you in combat, but where they lack in usefulness on the field, they make up for it in the combination of abilities they offer. They come with a link gauge that fills as they attack other Dream Eaters. Once one or both are full, you get a choice to use a skill of an individual spirit or both for a more powerful one. Sora and Riku have different effects for when these skills are used. Sora uses his spirits and the skills they come with, while Riku takes on special forms similar to Kingdom Hearts 2. And just an FYI, your spirits can die, so it's in your best interest to revive them if they go down. Otherwise, they'll turn back into material and you'll have to make them again. I touched a little on flow motion earlier, but its use in combat is a lot of fun at first too. Bouncing off walls, swinging off poles, and jumping off rails to see what special attacks would follow added to an already complex combat system. At the same time, you can also break the combat altogether with spamming your flow motion movement and attacks, which ended up being the case with me for a lot of the grouped up enemies and the small corridor areas. Even more so with the larger enemies that you can use flow motion on to spam throw at other enemies. On the topic of enemies, the Nightmares are no different than the Heartless and Nobodies from other Kingdom Hearts games in the sense of combat. For the most part, you can cut right through them, but there are a few that you'll have to be a little more cautious with and possibly switch up your tactics. I have a similar feeling towards the bosses. Most of them are pretty simple and can be beaten down with a little patience once you catch on to their patterns. As for the bosses near the finale, there's a drastic difficulty spike. It was a little frustrating because up until that point, you haven't been challenged in the use of your abilities and mobility to that extent, so it felt like a sudden learning curve to have to figure out the more advanced options of combat at the very end of the game. Adding insult to injury, you can drop during fights too. You do get an abundance of items to avoid dropping, but if you're not careful, you can get caught in the middle of a fight having to use one, if you even have one equipped to your deck. I did, and even so, having to use an item, especially during a difficult boss fight, got me killed more times than I care to mention. And if that wasn't bad enough, the camera and lock-on system was an absolute nightmare for bosses and enemies alike. Soft lock would frequently lock onto someone on the other side of the field rather than someone in front of me, or worse, lock onto someone behind me who wasn't even on my screen. Hard lock wasn't much better. It was a Russian roulette on whether the camera would follow me or if the lock-on system would even stay on the enemy. I had to unlock and lock back onto enemies multiple times for the camera to fix itself. If it wasn't that, then the hard lock would suddenly unlock and make my camera look behind me out of nowhere. Overall, the combat is fun when it works. It's the most fast-paced in the series yet, and you can tell there's a heavy reliance on flow motion attacks and using your spirits. Unfortunately, overusing them makes Dream Drop Distance extremely easy and leaves you unprepared for the finale when they are less useful. The soundtrack to Dream Drop Distance is great, with new versions to old songs and the introduction to even newer ones for the worlds we haven't visited before. One of the standouts for me has to be the Symphony of Sorcery. Not only is the music that plays in the back great, but there's a creative twist to the sound design when attacking enemies that made it even more enjoyable. The voice acting is top-notch as always. Returning characters and new ones being introduced didn't feel shoehorned in and took a more natural feeling, as if they'd been part of Kingdom Hearts from the beginning. The only complaint I would have is about the Dream Eater theme. I didn't like it, and after having to listen to it on repeat for all the minigames and some out-of-place cutscenes, it didn't get any better. If you ever feel like taking a break from the story, there's a couple things you can take on. Starting off with the link portals you see all over the place on every map. These can give you spirits to borrow, but some hold challenges against nightmares and harder versions of bosses. You can gain useful rewards for your spirits if you complete them, especially if you finish the extra challenge for the bonus rewards. If that doesn't do it for you, you can compete in the Flick Rush tournaments. This is where you put your Dream Eaters against other Dream Eaters with the Chain of Memories style card fighting. I won't go into great detail on how that all works, but generally you want your card number to be higher than your opponent's, and like Chain of Memories, you can stack your cards for better values. Winning tournaments rewards you with medals you can trade at the shop just outside for skills, spells, recipes, and other important items. By the time I finished Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, I had just under 30 hours clocked in. I found myself not really getting invested in the story until the very end, when everything opens up more. The dream within a dream inception felt like an unnecessary way to make an already complicated story worse. But with that aside, once everything started to come together, I loved the reveal and how all the dots were starting to get connected. Being able to finally witness Riku's journey and even control him has been something I've been asking for since they teased it in Chain of Memories. Something I didn't expect was how much of a center stage Riku would take. Sora and Riku share the spotlight for the better part of the game, but when the end starts to near, Riku takes the lead and I have no complaints. Riku's redemption story from the darkness to taking lead over Sora brought a swell of emotion I could have never guessed I would feel, almost like being proud. After following him through his worst, to see him at his best is a character arc you rarely see in games anymore. Sora, on the other hand, struggling and overcoming every adversity in every game, has been a staple in the Kingdom Hearts series. Seeing him fall behind and even fail was again something I didn't expect. I don't wish for any miscomings to happen to Sora, but at the same time, it was a refreshing change to see that the hero that always prevailed could potentially lose. With that all being said, Dream Drop Distance has one of the most important games connecting all the stories, which also makes it required to have played all the previous games up to this point to understand any of the references. There are flashbacks and a lot of reading that offers to help with filling in the gaps, but to be completely honest, I think it's best to just play the games. The revelations in Dream Drop Distance and everything finally getting connected was a long overdue surprise. The build up to now, with a glimpse to the final reveal seemingly near, has to be one of my favorites in the series so far. I only wish it didn't all take place at the end. Overall, I didn't mind Dream Drop Distance. I didn't love every aspect of it, and I didn't hate it either. There's a lot of fun to be had, but it felt like there was too much of a change to the Kingdom Hearts format and a little out of place. I can respect the attempt at something new like the Dream Eaters, but it wasn't what I was looking for or wanted in a Kingdom Hearts game, especially with how much focus is put on them and how you're forced to be dependent on them. The flow motion feature comes as a double-edged blade, with it being so much fun to use, but equally being overpowered and breaking the game, which makes the endgame difficulty spike even more of a gut punch when you have to figure out how to actually fight, and by then it feels a little too late to have to figure it out. And as for the drop system, I didn't hate it. It actually isn't a terrible idea. I'm not against switching between characters. The issue I had was not always having the choice. If there wasn't a timer and a more structured idea between switching, I feel I'd be able to accept it more willingly, but as is, it's more of an inconvenience. But it's not all bad. Like I mentioned before, the levels were fun and a solid return to a more open and free roam idea. The voice acting was on point, the story hits harder than ever, and the combat, with its flaws aside, is satisfying and some of the most fun I've had since Kingdom Hearts 2. But as a packaged product, it's just an okay game. Not terrible, but not great. I said it in the last video, and I'll say it again. I can only hope that Kingdom Hearts 3 is the amalgamation of everything that worked in previous games, while all the bad is left on the cutting room floor. And there you have it, my opinion on Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. Thank you for watching. If you like this and want to see more, make sure to check out my last video on Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix and click that subscribe button. If you want to see more of me, then head over to Twitch where I stream the games we'll be covering here. Link will be in the description. Thanks again, and I hope to see you soon.